Hello, today I'm going to be sharing with you my journey of suspecting autism, then officially being diagnosed to be autistic, and what happened after that. Potentially it might be a long story, so get something to do. Maybe you have laundry to fold, or maybe you just want to get a cup of tea. This is your sign to get that right. Hello, editing Alina here. I'm really sorry there's gonna be quite a lot of crackling noise in this video. It's just very unfortunate placement of the microphone. Hopefully you will still enjoy it. Initially, I was diagnosed with anxiety and panic disorder because I struggled with a lot of anxiety, as many of us who are on the spectrum struggle, especially we are female. We are conditioned into absorb all of our meltdowns, into not showing all of our emotional discomfort and all of our symptoms. Therefore, it's very often we are misdiagnosed either with BPD or anxiety or depression or a combination of everything. So because I've been diagnosed with anxiety and panic disorder, I've been put on SSRIs. Since then, I actually tried quite a few different SSRIs. I've been on sertraline, which didn't really work for me that well. I've been then later on citalopram, which I am still on it. And I personally find that it helps me, but I know many autistic people perceive SSRIs differently and many do not find them helpful. So just take it as it is. I was gone through many different CBTs for anxiety, for panic disorders, for any other things that they've considered I might have. A CBT have worked for me only for a short period of time, and then after a couple of months I felt exactly the same, because the reasons and the issues I was having anxiety wasn't really because of my thoughts, it was because of external factors that were affecting me to experience anxiety. This, of course, I understood only much later. So how all of this started? I think pandemic was the factor that has changed everything for me, because at the same time it became the most quietest time of our lives and the most noisy time of our lives. Let me explain. So at that time we lived on the high street, and every single time ambulance would have to pass, they would literally turn on the sirens right above our windows that were forcing me to jump up. I was literally getting physical symptoms every single time ambulance would have to pass and they would turn on sirens. This actually pushed us to move out of that street, which I'm extremely grateful. But also at the same time, I didn't have to travel to work. I was working from home. I didn't have to meet with people in person. I didn't have to take tube to travel on crowded trains. It was just so much better in terms of not actually interacting with many human beings. I felt so much relieved because of that. And when we were easing off pandemic and everything was starting to go back to normal, this is when I realized for the first time how difficult it is for me to actually travel through public transportation. I did not realize it before, but all these different sounds, all the different people, all different movement around me and unpredictable movement, that was what was giving me a lot of anxiety, to the point that previously in my life I was actually avoiding it. I purchased an electric scooter, and instead of taking tube to work, I was scooting to work 10 miles every morning and every evening back home. For me, that was so much better than taking tube. Bear in mind, electric scooters at that point, and still to this day, are considered illegal in the UK. So I was literally going against the law because of how much difficult it was for me to take public transport. Then when we moved out of London and I no longer needed to go through a lot of public transportation, purchase the car, so everything became so much easier in my life in that sense. I noticed other physical symptoms that started putting me into question when and what is the reason. Basically, I started asking myself all these different questions. And the physical sensations that I'm talking about is when my husband would touch me and he would kind of pet me. I would feel an extreme annoyance at that time, at that point. And I can understand, why do I feel annoyance? Because my annoyance is not directed to him. I still love him dearly, and it's not about him, it's not about perceiving him, but it was about this physical sensation specifically. So I started to Google my symptoms. Well, I'm a chronic Googler of the symptoms, hey ho. The first thing that has popped in on the search, bear in mind this was before ChatGPT. First threads were talking about autism and that autistic individuals may perceive touches too significant and too uncomfortable. And I brushed it off straight away. I was like, no, I cannot be autistic. I had really distorted perception of autism. I was having complete misconception and obviously internalized ableism as well. There was a reason for it. My mom still works in school for kids with special needs, and she worked there my whole life. And the children that I've seen that she was caring for obviously were high support need, which I am low support need. And I never knew there was a differentiation. I never knew it was a spectrum. For that reason, I brushed it off really quickly. But then I started watching different videos on TikTok, and I've noticed that a lot of women who were talking about their autism were sharing their experience of life, their experience of everything around them. And I couldn't believe how much I actually feel like they're talking about me and my perception and my understanding of life. So I started thinking about this a little bit more. And also, of course, I've been exposed to a different type of autism, so I understood that, oh, okay, they look exactly like me, so maybe I am autistic. But I didn't give it too much thought at the time. I still was kind of only having it somewhere on the back of my mind. Then I decided to share some of my personal feelings and symptoms and how I perceive the world with my followers on Instagram. And a lot of people have responded to my stories with telling me, girl, you're autistic. And this was probably the call. It was the confirmation that I need to look into that a little bit more. I need to read about this. And I started reading from different articles online that I could find. I started sharing this with my closest friends that I feel that I actually might be autistic. And I also shared this with one of the friends that recently been diagnosed as well to be on the spectrum. And he recommended me this lovely book, which I will be linking down in the description. It is called Guide for Asperger's. but don't be alarmed. It is still a really useful book. And when I was going through this book, when I was reading this book, I had such a vast amount of emotions because, first of all, I couldn't understand how a book could describe my life so accurately. I was thinking, no, there is just no way they could know me so well. My whole life I thought that I'm so unique. I'm so different to everyone around me, and I was actually proud of being different. But here I read it through and I understand that, oh, okay, it's just my autism. But then at the same time, I finally felt like I found the place, I found the community, because my whole life I was going through all these different quizzes, all these different personality questionnaires to try to identify what is my personality, and they never actually were quite right, quite to the point. And here I'm reading this book and it's just so clearly describes me to the point of how I behaved when I was a child, how I behaved when I was a teenager, what were my special interests, and I felt so seen. It was incredible. So after reading this book, I felt fairly confident that I'm on the spectrum, but I still decided to seek official diagnosis. And I knew straightforward NHS is probably not going to be the right route for me. I heard from many other people what it is like to go through the assessment through NHS. And I just didn't feel like I can wait that long. I already felt an extreme urgency to actually get validation from someone or prove me wrong. I needed to know either way. I couldn't wait for years because we know that NHS waiting list is years, years and years. So thankfully my husband had insurance that covered neurodivergency, and we both were able to apply for the assessment. He applied for a different kind of neurodivergency assessment. I don't feel yet confident disclosing this without his approval. But yeah, we went through this route together, and we both were not knowing that we are both neurodivergent when we met and when we got married, which is incredible. It just shows how neurodivergent people are magnets to each other and how we attract each other and how we identify each other when we see each other, how we peer review each other. It's just crazy. So I managed to apply for official diagnosis through the insurance, and I still had to wait for a little while. So in total, I believe I got my first pre-assessment after a month of waiting, and then my assessment came 4 months later. It was a conversation over the phone. I think it was about an hour, and basically they just measure you of do you show enough symptoms to get you through a full assessment. I showed good amount. At that point I read quite a lot of information on autism and I could identify with quite a few things. So I felt like there was enough evidence that I could provide over the phone that would show them that I might potentially be autistic. So 4 months later, I was going through official full assessment. For me, it was going over the Teams, and it was over 2 different sessions. So the first session was basically going through the different questions and me providing a little bit more information on it. One thing actually I forgot to remember, before this assessment, I also need to fill in a very lengthy questionnaire providing more information for the assessors. So when we were going through the actual assessment, they were also asking me to provide more information more information on some of those questions that were in this questionnaire. It was quite a difficult process to do because a lot of questions were involved about my childhood, about my teenage years, about me growing up. And because I'm autistic and because was not diagnosed as autistic when I was a child, I had quite a lot of traumas to go through, and I had to talk about a lot of traumatic events and experiences through that process, which were not easy for me because every time I would bring this up, I would again experience all the same significant emotions that I would experience during this traumatic event, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to go through that. Second part of the assessment was more of looking at my behavior, looking at how I show myself in communication. And it was quite interesting. When I got the report, they said that I was able to hold eye contact for first half an hour or so, and then I no longer was able to hold eye contact. And it was just showing, how I've learned to mask through my whole life, how I learned to hold eye contact, how I learned to communicate with people, but it's all masking, it's all not natural to me. It's just how I learned to do. And after half an hour, when I got exhausted, obviously I couldn't hold the mask anymore. I stopped having an eye contact. I stopped. Potentially my voice has changed. My way of communicating, responding has changed. It became much more monotone. They have noticed that, and I never noticed that. When I talk to people, obviously I don't really see myself. It was very interesting to learn that information. Something that I actually want to mention to you guys, if you think that you might be autistic and you are needing to get through official diagnosis and you're aware of the queue within the NHS, I would advise you to look through Right to Choose, because there you can actually not wait such a long queue with your GP, but go straight away to the clinic that is specifically focused on assessing autism and potentially ADHD, and therefore they can put you on their waiting list, which potentially might be much shorter than your GP's NHS waiting list. But also, now being diagnosed, now having an official note within my NHS records, I have to be honest, I kind of regret of giving it to NHS at this point, because the political situation is very unclear now in the UK. And I worry that in the future there's going to be a day when this diagnosis actually going to give me harm and not benefit. So if you are worried about this as well, maybe you don't really have to go through official diagnosis. Just think about this. And honestly, self-diagnosis is just as valid. Trust me. If you can identify with many experiences that autistic people identify with, and you feel that you might be autistic, you most likely are autistic. Because let's be honest, neurotypical people do not suspect for years and months and days that they might be autistic. They don't want to be autistic. Yeah, they don't want to have anything with it. So if you already thinking you might be autistic, there is a really high chance that you are autistic. And self-diagnosis is just as valid. You don't really have to go through the official diagnosis. So I've been diagnosed. Now what? I was amazed of how little support we actually get here in the UK. And I would consider UK to be a really progressive country in terms of diagnosis of autism. And I was hoping that, well, if we're so good at identifying low supported need autism and diagnosing it, surely there should be a support as well after diagnosis. Yeah, no. I can find things that could actually help me at that point. I was lost. I was feeling a lot of different emotions. Obviously, I did feel validated that my suspicion was right, that finally I understand why I struggled my whole life so much, why I was so violent when I was in school, why I was beating all the children there where they were teasing me, why my response was so aggressive, and why it was so difficult for me to be friends when I was a teenager, to find people who I could be friends with. I was involved in many different groups of people, but I never truly believed that I belonged to any of that group. I was kind of a little bit with this group of people, a little bit with that group of people, but never really fully I had my own group of friends. I maybe had ever just one friend, and all these other people, they never really connected with me on a deeper level. And it always felt odd how relationships would start with people for 3-4 months and they would break after that, without me understanding the reason behind this, without even an opportunity for me to understand what I've done wrong in this relationship. And now looking back at it, I understand that most of the time it wasn't really my fault as much as neurotypical people just didn't want to have anything in common with me. Of course, I also understand that many people who I managed to still have contact with, even after many years of not talking, but now still having once in a while a good communication and good relationship, it's also a very high chance that they might be neurodivergent. Just because how it works, it's so much easier for us to have friends and be in contact with people who are neurodivergent than being friends with neurotypical. Just the reality is how it is. So I was validated, but then I also experienced a lot of grief. A lot of grief of all of those moments in my life when I had it really hard, when school lessons were not going really easy for me, when I was getting really bad grades at school again and again, when I was hiding those grades from my parents, when I was being told off and grounded really badly for lying about my grades. Just so much grief regarding how I was growing up. I then also had a lot of grief of my mom never identifying autism in me, even though she worked with people with high support needs, autism, and other disabilities with children. But then I identified that back in the day, we didn't know what low support need autism is. We didn't understand what Asperger's is. It wasn't really widely diagnosed either. Where I'm from, we didn't even talk about Asperger's at all. It wasn't really a discussion at all in the conversation. Yeah, one of my classmates, when I was in the 4th grade, was diagnosed with ADHD. That was quite interesting because he was one of a few people who I actually felt connected with and who I found really annoying at the same time. It's incredibly weird combination, but now I understand this is just how I in life perceive ADHD people. They are lovely people who I could have really deep connection with and really deep conversations, and the conversation never gets boring with these people. But at the same time, I find them too much. They're quite often too much for me. They love change all the time. They like different food all the time. And I want the same food all the time. And I want change in my terms. So yeah, it explains why it was such an interesting experience for me with this specific classmate. Nevertheless, realized that I couldn't really be diagnosed at that point because no one really understood at that point what is autism with low support needs. And the worst that would happen to me is that I would actually be moved to school with high support needs children, and I would not be given the education that I received. I would not be able to learn how to communicate with neurotypicals, even though it really wasn't easy for me. It was really difficult. I went through so much traumatic experience, but at the end of the day, I actually got the experience and I understand that kind of communication that is required. I understand little social things that are not described, even though I find them ridiculous. It's a different topic. But nevertheless, going through neurotypical school, managed to understand neurotypical rules to an extent. Of course, I still have issues in life that are linked to autism, and hopefully I will be able to share this with you a bit later. But I think the experience that I received, no matter how hard it was still worth it for me to get to where I am now in life, and I'm grateful for it. Now, later on, I did find support. There are different ways we could go for receiving support. One of them is personal independence payment, which is not a sustainable amount of money that you could stop working, even though so many of us cannot work whatsoever. It's not that we don't want to work, we just struggle to find work because we are autistic and neurotypicals don't want to hire us, don't want to deal with us. That's just the reality. But it's a really nice payment that you could receive to potentially work part-time somewhere, and maybe do little different jobs that would help you to sustain and live and continue living. We know it is really difficult for us. Then there is also access to work. So if you're planning to get a job, if you got an offer and you need support to getting into that job, you can apply for that. Or if you are already working and you feel like you need support, you can apply for a support through Access to Work. It's a grant that they give you, but of course they have a very specific rules of how you will have to claim these money then from them. It's a process on its own, and I was able to apply for this because I was needing occupational therapy and I was granted it. But nevertheless, even though I found occupational therapist myself, and occupational therapy is honestly the best therapy that has happened to me in my life. And if one therapy that I could recommend to any autistic individual is occupational therapy, because the support is focused on giving you tools to help you to live through your life, tools to have relationship with your parents, tools to have relationship with your partner, tools to be at work and have relationship at work, and how to accommodate yourself through your whole life to make your life a little bit easier, to not get constant burnouts at work, to not get significantly difficult relationship with your relatives. It really just gives you tools how to navigate your life. And I found it the most useful therapy ever. If you can go through one, I would highly recommend you. I'm also going to link in the description my therapist. Liz was absolutely amazing. She is on the spectrum herself. She has a lot of experience within NHS as well. So she can support you not only through your life, but through different experiences within NHS. And also she was a great support for me to create a letter for asking for support accommodations at work. So I would highly recommend you to go through either Liz that I'm gonna link in the description, or if you can find a therapist that works with occupational therapy yourself. It is really useful therapy for us autistic individuals. Was it easy to claim my money back from Access to Work? No. They are such a bureaucratic institution. They were asking me to provide invoices word to what they granted this therapy for and not what was initially on the invoice. So I had to wait for a claim to be declined for like 3 months, only then to create a new claim. And even though that new claim was created, they still made a mistake and paid me a smaller amount of money than they were supposed to pay me back. And I had to call them again. But finally, on that last call, the person who was there heard my struggle, understood my experience, fixed all the issues within that claim, and I received all of my money back that I paid myself for the occupational therapy that I initially was granted through Access to Work. Now, going back to personal independence payment, I never really dared to even go that route. Even Access to Work support was extremely difficult for me to handle, and I heard a lot of struggles of people who were going through personal independence payment allowance approval. It's not made for disabled people. I have so many emotions about this topic of how unfair this whole system is, how it is not made for disabled people, how it is made to make already really difficult life of disabled people harder. I just cannot comprehend this. So even though I technically could claim this support, because I truly believe that at some point in my life I will not be able to work, because I personally feel like every single year autism takes more and more from me, and it's harder and harder to deal with these things that previously was fairly easy. Maybe it's because I'm also approaching perimenopause and jumping hormones up and down also affect me. Maybe it's because I'm just burnt out from masking so long through my whole life. I don't know, but I feel like at some point in my life I could end up not being able to work, and I would be in need for that support. And now being more or less able, I don't think I will be able to go through that process. So what are we talking about? People who are in a desperate need for any support and they cannot get that support because of how significantly bureaucratic and difficult that process is. I could go on and on and on about support, or rather lack of support for disabled people here in the UK. But today I just want to give you something that helped me, and potentially if you're thinking that you might be on the spectrum, you might be able to use these as well. One of the things that definitely helped me is sunflower Lanyard. Let me actually show it to you. I ordered mine on Amazon and just personalized a little bit. I put a tag here that represents autism. I also put a few tags from my favorite curly brand, and this one is from Curly Brand, and this is from charity that I support. And of course my loops, these been incredibly helpful in many occasions, especially when I'm in a crowded place. There are a lot of people around me. I found that loops do help to reduce this kind of background noise and still hear people around you that are talking to you. It's not like reducing all the noise, and sometimes unfortunately loops are not enough for me, but it is still a really useful thing. And of course, the whole Lanyard, and here it has hidden disabilities, so you never actually need to disclose what are your disabilities, but you can put information on the back of the card talking about your, like, what assistance do you need and the family contact number, etc. I think it's quite useful, especially in cases where if you suffer, same as I am, with selective mutism, where significant emotional situations could completely reduce my ability to talk. You can imagine how difficult it is when you are within NHS space where you need to speak up for yourself, but you cannot, because what you hear is so emotional that this is it. I just closed down. Thankfully, I now go with my husband to most of my appointments, so whenever I cannot talk, he can jump up and ask the right questions that I would ask otherwise if I would not lose the ability to talk at that specific time. Another thing that really helped me and supported me was many Reddit subreddits that I've joined, specifically autism, women with autism, autistic people, etc. Search on subreddit autism and you will find quite a lot of different subreddits that are incredibly supportive. And it doesn't even mean that you have to publish there anything, even though you can, because it's all anonymized, so you don't really have to put your picture, your actual name. I personally feel so much safer to share about my experiences that I struggle with, but also you can read other people's experiences there and you can see how different people deal with them in the comments. Everyone has different tips, everyone has different solutions, and you can try all of them differently if you experience the same issues and see if any work. Maybe you'll find something that is helpful specifically for you. Sometimes you need just support and acknowledgement of your experiences, and that's the right place to receive that. Yes, sometimes you will receive people who disagree with you, and that is absolutely fine. And I actually appreciate the autistic community for it, because people are very straightforward and they say what they think. But it's not about confirmation of your biases and confirmation of your opinions. It's about sharing your experience and finding tools and finding how other people already learned how to deal with those struggles. But there is one thing that I want to highlight to you. Do not disclose that you're autistic if you do not feel safe in that environment. Only disclose your diagnosis or your self-diagnosis whenever you feel safe, because so many people will just use it against you. And whenever you don't feel safe, it might not give you the support that you need, but actually make your situation even more difficult. Unfortunately, I've been made redundant twice in my life in the previous jobs because I was just saying what I was truly thinking and no one else was saying that. I truly believe it's because I was speaking up. It was never about my performance. I'm really good at my job because what I do is my special interest. Nevertheless, I was made redundant, and I still truly believe it's because I'm autistic, because I spoke the truth when owners wanted to hear confirmation of their opinion, and I'm just not that person, unfortunately. So sometimes you don't even disclose you're autistic and you still end up being in trouble. It's just the reality. It's the life we live in, and the closer we stay to each other, the more we would support each other, the stronger we will get. Now, I already mentioned here that I'm approaching perimenopause. I also realized that I struggle with infertility. I've been struggling with infertility for the last 2 years. I'm gonna share all about this in my next video. Sorry, this channel might become just trauma dumping, but it is what it is. I'm just hoping that what I'm going to share with you, you'll find at some form helpful. Thanks for being today with me, and I'll see you later. Bye.